Morning, everyone. So we'll get started with the next session. We have online 3 inspiring leaders from Samaj. The theme for today is schemes to systems. How do we understand the interplay between Samaj, Sarkaar, and Bazaar? And we couldn't have no better people to invoke how to look at the interplay between the three than whom we have on board. So we have 3 people who've inspired their vision across the interplay of these 3 sectors, not just at a thought level. They have managed to think deeply about how to integrate work across Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, having had experience across all the 3, society, markets, and state. But they've also gone the next level to really commit to a level of action which has really set new benchmarks, either in philanthropy or in executive leadership, in terms of running cabinet or as members of parliament. So I will not take much time. I'll just clarify the agenda for the next 90 minutes. We have with us Mrs. Rohini Nilekani from Rohini Nilekani Philanthropists, Dr. PTR, and Finance Minister of Tamil Nadu, and Member of Parliament, Mrs. Mahua Moitra. So the structure for the next 90 minutes, we'll have first Rohini, then Dr. PTR, and MP Mahua ma'am, each share their keynote invocations on how they see the interplay between Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, and what could be a Samaj-driven vision for improving last mile delivery of welfare. So I'll request Rohini to get us started.
Dhanyawad and Namaskara. Thank you, Tarun. Thank you, Indus Action. Thank you, all the people gathered there. It's nice to see you all. Sorry we are not there in person. That I'm feeling very bad about. Next time. And a very special namaskar to the 2 senior politicians here. Dr. Palanivel Tyagarajanji and Mahua Moitra ji, though I don't quite see her on the screen yet. So the theme of from schemes to systems is a really important theme, Tarun, and thank you for flagging this, because it is now 15 years that I've been talking so much in public, boring everybody even, to talk about this continuum of Samaj, Bazaar, and Sarkar, which has to remain as a very dynamic balance, because we need all 3 to work together. And there will always be pulls and pushes, but very important to realize it is a continuum. But in that continuum, I do believe that Samaj takes the primacy, society takes the primacy, and that it should be called the first sector, because Sarkar and Bazaar have to be the second and third sectors, I believe, behind this first sector, which is Samaj, which is actually all of us. And civil society groups like the ones gathered here, we have to find ways to interact ever more with the political class and the business class. Because after all, no matter sometimes what people think, civil society groups are not anti-government or anti-market. They have to be pro-Samaj, pro-people. And that is their first duty. And that is their first call. And everybody, bar none, as we all know, is a citizen first. Before they are a politician, before they are a bureaucrat, before they are a CEO, before they are an employee, we are all citizens first. And last too, when we shed our day job identities and go home. So it is very important that we in the civil society group, whether we are the donors community or the frontline community in civil society organizations, that we always keep the bazaar class and the political class in mind when we are designing anything towards social welfare. So thank you for bringing up this scheme in this action, and I'm so happy that you all began yesterday. I got some feedback that was a very good session. I have very few minutes. I don't want to take too much time. I hope there'll be more occasions like this where we can be physically present to talk about this very important issue. But what is the role of Samaj and Samaj-based organization in times like these? I want to very quickly flag one thing, because we can't talk about too many things in the 10 minutes that I have. But I have now begun to believe, after watching the kind of divisiveness everywhere, that the role of empathy has become more critical than ever, especially for us in the Samaj sector to uphold. I think that inner to outer journey, which we all strive for, which is perhaps the most difficult journey on this planet, that how the inner and the outer sense of well-being is projected through fundamental values, I think is very important. And in that, empathy for me is now seeming to hold a very important point. And here, how civil society institutions behave and what programs they create is going to become very important in the times to come. So we have to be careful that we don't create any cancel culture, as they call it in the West, no otherization. Yes, people need others. It seems it's almost about evolutionary biology. We need to have some outsider to feel strong in ourselves. But how can we understand that and yet not create further otherizations through our own words, through our own jargon, through our own ideological walls? I think it's very important today for civil society to little bit reflect on that. How can we create more shared spaces for a discourse, a civil discourse with more people? Can we create those spaces where we withhold judgment? Because I think without that, where we are headed is not looking very idealized right now. So how do we take on this very difficult task of helping ourselves and others to see ourselves as more than subjects or as more than beneficiaries, which is where that schemes to systems things also kicks in, as more than consumers? How can we help all the people we work with, and starting with ourselves, to understand ourselves as humans first in a very complex web of humanity, as citizens and as Nagriks? And what are Nagriks? What do Nagriks do, right? We as Nagriks have to be aware, we have to be alive to what is happening around us socially, economically, politically, ecologically. We have to feel we belong to a community of other citizens. And it doesn't matter if that community is just the neighborhood community in your mohalla, in your block, it could be your city, it could be your village, or even globally, because each one is important, especially if those bonds are thick and not thin. Social media has created many thin bonds, and thin bonds, it is easy to divide people very quickly. With thick bonds, it is less easy to divide people. And civil society groups play a really huge role in creating those thick bonds of action, where everyone is trying to make a better society together. As citizens, we want to be curious and willing to participate in the co-creation of a society which makes our lives and other lives, and both are important, better, more abundant, and more creative. And for me, in today's 10 minutes, the second important word after empathy is going to be creativity, because creative is a very important word. Of course, I'm a writer, but even otherwise, because the apex, the zenith of human history has all been about the ability of these very frail, complex, flawed humans that we all are to generate beauty through their own talent, through their agency, through cooperation. All the beauty in the world comes from our creativity. And it's not just physical beauty as in art and sculpture, but also big new social ideas of humans trying to better themselves all the time, of social movements, of creating more equity, more inclusion, more empathy. And that creativity of becoming the best we can be and creating things to make us the best we can be is, I believe, the most important thing for Samaj organizations to nurture. It's not easy. These are very challenging times, because in a kind of reversal of the global liberal order, which had perhaps gone stale, it had lost its relevance, and more importantly, maybe it had lost its creativity, we seem to be in a grip all over the world, and here in India too, of the shrinking of identities to narrower and narrower selves. From global to national, national to regional, regional to religional to tribal, and I don't know from tribal where it ends. For the political class, and with excuses to the two senior politicians here, for the political class, this narrowing of identities can be beneficial. It can help to create voter groups. For markets, it can be beneficial. It can maybe create good segmentation to capture consumer bases. And sometimes I only half jokingly say that Bazaar has made the tyranny of choice so complex, you can't even buy rice anymore without saying what kind of rice, red rice, white rice, boiled rice, organic rice, this rice, husk rice, hull rice, whatever it is. This has become like a tyranny of choice. And it is so complex for people. And the pandemic especially has made, say, personal or family choices in the social arena so frightening that perhaps people now just want simplicity in their politics. They want to delegate and say, you know, I can't handle so much choice, and they want to maybe forget about it. It's partially a joke, but remember, this is always going to be a cop-out, and all of us must beware of this trap, because we cannot escape from co-creating the good society that we want to be in. We cannot escape from co-creating the good governance that we want. And otherwise, if we delegate this very important civic citizen action that we all have to do, what happens is a kind of a monoculture and monopoly of thought and ideas, because you have delegated, abdicated, and become apathetic, right? So that is something we all have to creatively not fall into ourselves and enable others also to become aware of. So everyone knows, it's often used cliche, monocultures versus rainforests. We want healthy, diverse ecosystems, both on the earth as well as in our minds, because they are much more sustainable for prosperity and progress. But for Samaj, that's why for Samaj and civil society, this shrinking to the smaller and smaller self is not beneficial, as it might be in some cases to the Bazaar class or the Sarkar class, because it only generates more fear, more insecurity, more divisiveness, and eventually and inevitably can lead to conflict. So I think today's very important challenge ahead of us is that the role of CSOs, of all active citizen organizations that have come together here, and I salute each and every one of you. So the role of CSOs, I do truly believe, and it is our job as the donor community to support you wherever and as much as we can, is to help people see ever more of themselves in relation to the outer world, through collective action, through collective co-creation, through campaigns, projects, ideas, workshops. And eventually, we mustn't forget, they must lead to building more empathy among people, to see themselves in other people's shoes, and it might even perhaps other future generation shoes, to look out for the well-being of all. And then, of course, to generate and unleash more and more creativity to become the highest embodiment of ourselves. Is that all too idealistic in such times? Of course it is. It is very idealistic. But if together we believe in this human project, and the human project can be executed at the smallest level by ourselves, in our families, communities, and wider, but to believe in this human project, whether it takes 25 years or 100, if we believe, then we can move inexorably through our small actions, whatever they may be, all the kinds of things that all of you do and that I read about and I'm so proud of. We can move inexorably towards this goal with a feeling of hope and belief that all these actions that all of you do so well, and you hold your beliefs so well, we can believe then and have faith that all these drops of water will eventually create that ocean, that big, generous Samaj that we all want to belong to. I could go on and on, but I won't. I'll just say we are very proud of the institutions that are gathered here today. There's a lot of work ahead for us. People are perhaps, and you know, we don't talk about how much climate change is also dictating the politics, the culture in our societies everywhere in the globe, but that's for another time. But I would say, as they say, lage raho munna bhai, we have to keep doing our work every day, and we have to carry people with us. I wish you all great luck for the rest of the day. I will listen in for some time. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and really more power to the elbow of every single organization and all the people I saw who are gathered here today. Thank you. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.
Thank you, Rohini. Sorry, I can hear myself. Thank you, Rohini, for a powerful start, and also quite a passionate reminder of both a call for empathy and creativity. It reminded me
I do see Mahua ji also there. So namaskar, Dr. Parnivel Tyagarajan also. Namaskar. Thank you for being here. And I'm so sorry we are not all in person. Thank you, Tarun.
Thank you, Rohini. So it reminded me of, I was just saying that it reminded me of what used to be said in the house, pursuit of Satyam, Shivam, and Sundaram. So what you shared today, reminded me of what my grandmom and, mom used to say growing up, pursuit of truth, beauty, and goodness. So thank you for that powerful reminder and, framing this discussion. Grateful for your time and thank you for making it in spite of being unwell. So really grateful for that. So over to, like I said, we have two great public servants who've set new benchmarks in public service. It, uh, in spite of being first-time cabinet minister and first-time members of parliament, like I personally believe they're probably one of the best finance ministers and members of parliament around. So we'll go first to Dr. PTR. Sir, over to you, and look forward to your invitation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, first for inviting me and then for putting me in such an eminent panel. I must confess by saying that born into a life of privilege and having spent 30 years overseas as an expat, I have very little connectivity to the community action kind of spectrum of the world. So let me maybe pick up where Rohini left off. I think at some profound level, the people get the government they deserve. That is, to the extent that they are involved in the democracy, that they make their voices heard, that they make their preferences known, that they're able to coalesce the right kind of support to it, then that's the outcome they get. And in fact, when I find very inexplicable outcomes at, say, the national level or in the northern belts, that's what alleviates some of the agony I feel when I see people who have very poor performance continuously getting re-elected. But be that as it may, I'll also pick up on a second point that Rohini mentioned, which is empathy. And I think empathy is the foundation for a lot of things. By coincidence, about 20 plus years ago, when I first went to Wall Street, one of the best traders I ever met in my life told me the single greatest value of a trader or attribute of a trader is empathy. To be able to know what is in the mind of the person on the other side of the phone, whether you're dealing tens of millions or billions, that's the real asset. Maybe I start from there and say, if I'm going to talk about Sarkar, what defines a Sarkar, first of all, has to be the philosophy and values of the movement of the party that gets to be elected and form the Sarkar. In the case of the Dravidian movement, in which I'm a very proud fourth generation representative, it was always about inclusion, about self-respect, about an egalitarian society, about mostly social norms, and then eventually to economic equality as well. But those values started in the 1921 series of legislation when the Justice Party, the forefather of all Dravidian parties, first formed the government under diarchy. They started with enfranchising women, which till then did not exist in India, in fact, in many parts of the world. Then with compulsory elementary education for all communities, for boys and girls. Then feeding them to make sure that they could get compliance with the compulsory law. Communal geo, which reserved government jobs in the proportion to the population of every community, from Adi Dravidas to every other community, to ensure that every community had a mentor, an example, a forerunner who could then pull the rest of the community with them and the rest of their village or town with them. So the values have stayed unchanging from 1916 when the Justice Party was founded and my great-granduncle was one of the signatories, through the Justice Party governments where my grandfather was a minister, chief minister, through the DMK governments where my father was speaker and minister. And after 30 years overseas, I've come back and been an MLA and a minister. Our values, the party's values, have stayed the same. Of course, things change economically, societally, environmentally, and part of a good Sarkar is being able to adapt your policies, adapt your execution model to the changing times. So I don't want to go too much into it, but I'd say that the shift has focused away from purely social justice, equality, access to your own language, entry into temples, all communities treated the same, removal of kind of a caste and hierarchy system. Not 100% complete, but much better than in most places and much better than it used to be, towards more of a economic inclusion, equal opportunity for people who don't have the ability to get the same quality education and so forth. And so maybe I give one example of that. Till this year, various governments, starting with the DMK government back in the 70s and 80s, and including the ADMK government, had started giving incentives or support for marriages. Because one of the things we found was many times it is not just about lifting people out from one economic strata to another, but also keeping them there. And the thing that brought them down a lot is always, anywhere in the world, health problems, if you don't have a universal health system, and then big expenses like weddings. And so at various times, various governments actually started and expanded, started with the DMK, but expanded through many governments, assistance for weddings for women. And they gave two levels of awards. One, if you were not as educated, a lower level, 25,000 and 8 grams silver of gold. And then if you were college educated, 50,000, 8 grams of gold. And this year we had an intense discussion internally, and we decided that we would accept some of the criticism that these schemes were more towards almost encouraging marriage or even supporting a kind of dowry system. And because these schemes had anyway not been executed for 4 or 5 years and the backlog had built up and people had gone on with their lives, we decided we'd completely break that scheme and instead refocus the scheme towards women's education, because we were finding 52% of the Tamil Nadu population is not in the actively seeking workforce. And the bulk of that is women. So we said, what we got to do is the kind of good attendance in school, in high school, and +2 graduation rates we see of women equal our men. We got to continue that through other education. So we've transformed that scheme, and now we've made that scheme into 1,000 rupees a month supplemental scholarship, supplemental to any other benefit, irrespective of whether you go to a government institution, free, cheap, whatever. If you leave after 10th and go to an ITI or a polytechnic, we will pay till you finish your course. If you leave after 12th and go to a arts or a science or engineering or a medical college, we will pay that every month till you finish. And if I had my way, I would also put in some kind of lump sum payment at the end of graduation, but maybe we'll bring that next year. So we have transformed our interpretation of how we execute our values based on the economic circumstances and based on the data that we get. Of course, the final part of that is to have good systems and good infrastructure. As a guy who ran very large businesses globally for very large institutions, I've been appalled at the lack of continuity, lack of data, lack of institutional memory, lack of institutional knowledge that governments kind of are exemplified by. And so, I'm on a path with my Chief Minister's support to improve that. We are working with a lot of brilliant minds around, plus the experiences that I bring from running large operations across the world. And one of the things that our data suggests is that we have a real problem getting our schemes to the bottom of the pyramid. Even something like our old age pension or a disability pension or a widow pension, which we've had for 10, 15 years, our studies suggest that we get to the second lowest level of the pyramid, but we don't get to the lowest. We are an aging society. We have a very low fertility rate to match our kind of middle income GSDP per capita of about 3 lakh rupees a year. So we have only about a 1.6 fertility rate, total fertility rate. We have an aging population. Some of these people are living alone. And those are a significant number, like 14, 16%. And those who are living alone don't know technology, don't have somebody to help them enroll. They are getting left out. So as I've said on the floor of the House, that is administrative failure, that is a blot on our conscience. And so we are trying to improve the systems to make sure that we can reach, and looking at it, I'd say just in two closing things. Till now, we have had government departments get allocated budgets, and then they try to decide how they spend the money. And this has worked reasonably well, but it's left this huge gap for two reasons. The first reason, in any democracy, the people who have access, the unions, the powerful, the rich, the able to buy lobbying or electoral bonds, always get their voices heard. That's the fallacy of any democracy. It's not unique. or the structural flaw in any democracy. What we miss are the poor, the weak, the unorganized who are not able to get their voices heard. And so the mark of a good government is to figure out how we overcome the structural flaw in the democracy and go to the bottom of the pyramid. And as part of that, we want to change the entire focus away from department-based schemes to beneficiary-based ecosystems. And we're getting a lot of help from our global economic advisors for that. So we want to have a universal health system. What are the different kinds of components of that? Who's likely to access it? At what age in their life? How do we get that into one integrated? And then we have different parts of the government do different functions in that. We want to have one integrated coverage of senior system. It's no longer about you having to enroll. We will automatically enroll you. We will automatically link you to the what we call Makkale Thedi Marthum. The house delivery of medicines will now be expanded to do house delivery of mental counseling and check-in. And then once a year, you come and take your vitals with us. And that's the equivalent of what a pensioner gives as a life certificate to say you're still alive. Instead of that, you come and take your test and we can use that to track your medical progress. And we get some software from the University of California that will do some machine learning and will tell us who's likely to end up having serious heart problems or liver or kidney problems in the next year, so forth. So it's not the components that are remarkable. Different systems will have different components. But we change the focus. It is not about the government. It is not about the money. It is not about the department of spending. It is about the beneficiary or the intended beneficiary. Look at it from their perspective. What are their lives like? And how do we provide a comprehensive set of services or safety net or support systems, whether that's in education, whether that's in health, whether that's in the notion of a comprehensive welfare policy, a social welfare policy. So anyway, I think our philosophy is quite different from the government that runs the union. But I think that I'll end where I started. If you don't start with compassion and empathy, almost everything else is irrelevant. You will never be a good government. So as far as Sarkaar is concerned, I think compassion, empathy, and then competence, administration, execution, technology, these will be the basis for determining outcomes and future kind of satisfaction. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and especially one for a I think a rejoinder on the underlying values that drive the pursuit of justice. And I think what was inspiring to hear in detail was how you've been able to deconstruct and encode that. I know, I remember when we met, you shared how, governments have the power to legislate with the pen. And I think the examples you shared on the women's education scheme or the UBI scheme that Tamil Nadu government has started to pioneer, and especially the shift from scheme-based approach to focus on archetype of vulnerable citizens, and how can all the schemes be oriented towards systems around moments that matter, whether it's birth, death, transition between school and workforce, etc. So once again, thank you for your time. And what we'll do next is we'll go to MP Mahua Moitra ma'am, and then we'll open it up for questions. So without wasting much time, I'll briefly share a little bit about MP Mahua ma'am. So just about 10 years ago, there was a panel on politics as a vocation, and Mahua at Howard Kennedy School was starting up, and 10 years later, it's inspiring to see her in her first tenure and kind of make a mark. And so thank you, Mahua ma'am, for making it here today. So over to you for your invocation.
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me? Hello? Can everyone hear me? I hope they can. It's actually quite difficult.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Being the third speaker when you have speakers like Rohini and PTR ahead, because they've said everything that you pretty much thought you would say, and they've said it with such grace and such competence. It's very hard to give up, but I will try. I have to say that what I think both speakers before me highlighted, which is also something I would like to highlight, is empathy. I liked what Rohini said about idealism and about how civil society, that government is only an extension, should only be an extension of society. And it should be the backup. We have Samaj in the front and we have Sarkar and markets in the back. And following up from that is also what PTR said. He said that it's not that governments have an outlay and they have to spend it, and that's when you have gaps. We should actually start from the bottom of the pyramid, see what and hear and listen to what the beneficiary needs. And everything really has to be tailored around that, rather than a Sarkar making up its mind that I will spend X on Y, and then we have all these gaps. So this is great learning, and I think 70 years after independence, a lot of state governments are doing very good work based on that same principle. I've also been a great admirer of the Dravidian movement and the Trinamool Congress also, of which I am a part. Our state government is Trinamool, means grassroots. So we would like to believe that we start everything from the grassroots. One of the things that we're talking about is empathy. And empathy in India is, I would say in some ways, when PTR mentioned, he said that it's really most unsettling to see people who are not very competent get elected over and over again. And that is something that has bothered me for a very long time. I keep thinking, what is the mystery of somebody who's really not done very much work at all get elected? And sometimes the answer to that is empathy, because I see a lot of public representatives who don't actually do any work on the ground. When you try and measure them up with any parameters, how many roads have you built, how much work have you done, it's zero. But when you ask people, why do you vote for them? And they say, oh, well, he's here. If there's a birthday party, he comes. If there's an Annaprasan ceremony, we get him. We can go to his house and he listen to us for 2 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it may be. So they don't actually measure him or her by the amount of work that is actually on the ground, but the fact that that person is available to connect at an emotional level and at an empathetic level actually goes a long way as a public representative. So that's one part of empathy, which is a good thing, but may not be very good when it comes to delivery of systems. The other thing that I wanted to point out is when I first came to India and I entered public life, one of the things that struck me, I've lived in Scandinavia, I've lived in the UK, one of the things that struck me was that here everyone runs after politicians. And I kept thinking, why? Why does every politician have 200 people running after them? And the first time you meet somebody, they say, oh, I know X or I know Y. I know this MLA, I'm very close to this MP. And I used to think, what's the thing? And then you think it is because in India, we have not given access to goods and services to people, especially to services. So people regard politicians or middlemen as a conduit to getting services. So if you know an MLA or you know an MP, it is a means to getting a hospital admission or a bed in a hospital where there is no bed available, or it is getting a road repair in front of their house when nobody is listening, or it is getting a school admission for a child. So I think as we develop and as state governments get better at doing bottom of the pyramid and direct last mile connectivity and delivery, this emphasis on the middleman or the politician, on the public representative as a conduit to get access to what should be available readily to everyone is going to die away. And that is, I hope, an India that I certainly am working for, that I feel after listening to PTR, he's working for, and definitely Rohini ji has also been working for. So two of the things that I would like to sort of emphasize on are what the Bengal government has done. One of the things that PTR also pointed out was that having women as the center of delivery systems, because most households are managed by women and 50% of the population is women. And for a long time, it was only, I think, about 10 years ago that people woke up to the fact that we must have delivery systems aimed at women. Tamil Nadu has done this better. I remember even as a child reading about how the Tamil Nadu government would give idli making machines and dosa batter making machines to women. And at that time, we didn't understand why. But when you understand, when a woman of a household feeding 4 or 5 people, how much of a labor-saving device a mixer or a mixie, as it is called, can be when you're actually making dosa batter for everybody is very important. And using that going forward, even now, what Bengal has done is 2 very important schemes. One is what is called the Duare Sarkaar. Duar means door, and Sarkar obviously is Sarkar. So it's government at your doorstep. What would happen is, as we know, that you have block development offices everywhere. And one BDO or one block development officer serves 8 panchayats or 9 panchayats. And people have to travel 15 kilometers or 17 kilometers to come to the BDO office. And what we've seen through studies is you will find the same people who come to the BDO office, and there's a bottom 10% or a bottom 20% that is never serviced, that don't come to the block office, and the block office can't get to them. So what we did was we've come up with this a program called the Duare Sarkaar, where there are 4 camps held in every GP. Every panchayat has 4 of these camps. It is held in a local school or in a local area, which is a catchment area for that particular village. So nobody has to come more than 1.5 kilometers. So 2 kilometers is the cutoff, that nobody will have to go more than 2 kilometers to a camp. And in this camp, every single major program of the government is there. There is no middleman. You go directly. If you're already a beneficiary and you're facing a problem, you can speak about it. If you're not a beneficiary and you need to sign up, you can do it. And there's a month, within 30 days, you will be enrolled if you're entitled for the program. This has been a great success in Bengal. We've had 1.7 crore enrollments, of which 1.5 has been just for one scheme, which is the Lakshmi Bandar scheme, which is giving the female head of household 1,000 rupees per month. And we've had a footfall of about 1 crore in the last Duare Sarkaar camp, which has been an all-time high. The newest thing that we've come up with, also similar to what PTR said, was that 1,000 rupees per month to the female head of household. And this kind of helps, I think, Samaj, Sarkar, and market. Because when the female head of household is getting an extra 1,000 rupees, then she's going out and she is spending it on the local market. And post-COVID, I think, because everyone got, the cash flow was so tight in families when there was just no cash post demonetization and post COVID, that this extra 1,000 rupees, this extra power has really helped the local economies get back on track. So this has been very important. One of the other things that we've done is a grievance redressal mechanism also at the bottom of pyramid level, a level called the Parai Samadhan. Para means a hutment or a very small locality. So it says that we've got 2,600 camps per month across Bengal, and you set them up in your area and people can go and say, look, there's a lamppost outside my house, that light hasn't worked for 2 years. I've told everyone, the Pradhan isn't getting it fixed. Or the road outside or the drain outside my house, every monsoon gets flooded. My children can't go to school. I can't get it fixed. So this is the kind of direct complaint mechanism, not through a phone call, but you're actually talking to a human being at the Parai Samadhan camp and you're putting it in. And the government is bound within a 30-day or a 60-day time frame to respond to it. So I think these are the kind of things that the government has done to show empathy. And all these programs, I think, which will take people forward, are going to be programs that are beneficiary-led, where we as sarkars and as markets listen to beneficiaries and tailor all the schemes around what they want. And I agree with PTR also. We've had a scheme called the Rupasri, which basically used to aid with weddings. And sooner or later, I think we'll have to do the same thing, because we've got something that helps people stay in school till you're 18 and they give you 25,000 rupees lump sum if a girl child has stayed in school without getting married till 18. And then we've given, when you get married after 18, the money, but there's also the downside of that, where people think that you're encouraging people to get married quickly in order to claim the money. So I think this scheme also needs to be tailored a little bit. But apart from that, I'm very thankful to Indus Action for doing the kind of work they've done in our area. And the fact that we've got together and we're talking about these things is very important. We definitely need to improve the data collection systems and the data storage systems. I too am appalled at the lack of any historical data sometimes. And even now, I don't think we're doing as good a job as we should to go forward. So future generations will have top class data to go forward with. I'm very happy that philanthropists like Rohini are in India and they're working very hard, whether it's on water, whether it's on children's education or all of this. So I hope together with the help of young people at Indus Action that we can take this forward. Thank you again for inviting us, and God bless everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahua ma'am. Once again for reinforcing the core value of empathy. But I think sharing very intricate details about both Duare Sarkaar and Parai Samadhan. And it reminds me of a small ethnography study we did on Duare Sarkaar. It was very inspiring to see kind of democracy in action. So I was in the school where, like you said, all the 17 entitlements, were, up for access. Like all the government, local officials, wore in the camp, it was almost like a festival. Like it was like a mela where, all the government officials, all citizens having kind of direct accountability chain, and also Kanyashri, scholarship girls, managing and supporting these desks as well. So it's great to see, like you said, Samaj, Sarkaar really come together. And also there was a small, actually, market just outside the school as well. So it was a perfect picture of, all three elements of, society really coming together and working in a beautiful fashion. I'll keep that image for a while. So yeah, thanks for all three of your invocations. Very inspiring and motivating. If it's okay, we'll take the next 20 to 30 odd minutes to take questions from the audience. Yep. Okay. Sure. So the floor is open. Yeah. So we'll get started. We'll have first. So, yeah. Do you want to come? So Tabasum, Biraj next, and anybody else? So we'll have Tabasum share her question. So
शुक्रिया। जैसे कि महुआ मैम ने बोला कि बिल्कुल उनको सच्चाई बताई, मतलब कि लोग आजकल जो पॉलिटिशियंस हैं वो बड़े प्यार से बस हाथ फेरते हैं और काम निकालते हैं, मतलब उससे ही सिंपैथी गेन करते हैं और काम पे इतना ज़्यादा ध्यान नहीं देते। उसी के लिए मैं ये कहना चाहती हूँ, जैसे कुछ लोग अपना दरबार लगाते हैं और वो टाइम देते हैं कि इतने से इतने बजे तक आप मुझसे मुलाकात कर सकते हैं, लेकिन उस बीच में क्या होता है, जैसे पेंशन्स के मैं एक एग्जांपल ले रही हूँ, अगर पेंशन किसी बंदे को बनवानी होती है और उसमें विधायकी स्टैम्प चाहिए होती है और साइन चाहिए होता है, उसके लिए एक सीनियर सिटीजन उसके ऑफिस में 4 चक्कर लगाता है, ठीक है। और अगर कोई विडो पेंशन है या ओल्ड एज पेंशन है, वो 4 बार ही जाती है। आप एक देखिए कि विडो पेंशन के लिए एक महिला अपने बच्चे को, क्योंकि उसके घर में कोई दूसरा कमाने वाला नहीं है, वो अकेले अपने बच्चों को मैनेज कर रही है, घर मैनेज कर रही है, उसके बाद अगर वो 4 बार जाती है तो पर डे का अगर उसका 500 रुपीज़ भी आप उसका चार्ज करें तो वो 250-300 2,500-3 हज़ार रुपये ऑलरेडी डायरेक्टली और इनडायरेक्टली उसको पे कर चुकी होती है, जो उसको एहसास भी नहीं होता, मिनिस्टर को, उस विधायक को ये एहसास भी नहीं होता कि मैं इसकी पर डे की जो झाड़ी है, जो डेली की, मैं इसका नुकसान कर रहा हूँ। तो मैं ये चाहती हूँ कि समाज से ना ये जो पेंशन पे या किसी भी तरीके के सर्टिफिकेट्स में जो गजेटेड ऑफिसर्स के जो साइन चाहिए होते हैं, विधायक के साइन चाहिए होते हैं, इसको और ख़त्म करा जाए, क्योंकि ये बहुत ज़्यादा टाइम ख़राब करते हैं और नुकसान करते हैं।
So yeah, I'll briefly translate. Can I take 30 seconds to translate? Yeah. So what Tabasum was saying is, especially with pensions and like some of the key entitlements, which is almost the only cash flow senior citizens or single widows have, the transaction cost for almost every interaction is close to 2,500 to 3,000 rupees because it takes on average 4 to 5 trips. In fact, in our experience, we've done the mapping of this to access an entitlement in major cities itself. The average number of transactions a citizen has to do in the last mile is about 10. And they can spend anywhere between 150 rupees for travel. We're not counting opportunity cost of wage losses. So her question is like, are there better ways to kind of remove the last mile validation? So do we really need for every scheme like a new layer of validation? Can we go away with some of the gazetted officer requirements that are needed for especially pensions?
मैं हिंदी में बोलूँ तबस्सुम जी, and then I'll translate it into English for PTR. अच्छा ठीक है, मैं हिंदी में बोलती हूँ। आप जो कह रही हो एक बहुत ही this is absolutely what is happening on the ground. और मैं जब पहले विधायक बनी थी, मैं विधायक थी before I became an MP, मैं विधायक थी, और मुझे हर सुबह मुझे लगता था कि ऑफिस के बाहर लोग आ रहे हैं साइन कराने, क्या साइन कराने आते, कि हर कुछ छोटी छोटी चीज में साइन कराने आते, या प्रधान का साइन चाहिए, मेरे के साइन चाहिए. And then slowly I think now in the last 5 years we have moved to a system where for widow pensions, where for Lakshmi Bhandar, for any of the big schemes, you do not need a signature of an MP or an MLA. All you need to do is to go to the BDO office or the block development office. It is purely administration based. So there's no other way apart from that. I mean, you'd have to go and apply there. And now that we've got these Duare Sarkaar camps, We are trying to even cut out the necessity of having to go to the block development office. If we can do it in that particular panchayat is what we are aiming to do. So the necessity, I think now, the only thing as an MP that I sign are frankly the Prime Minister's Relief Fund recommendations. And there's some kind of, I think, cancer treatment for the CM Relief Fund that requires an MP. So apart from these very specialized health-related things for ordinary things, and they would come and they would say patients in rural areas, they're going to Calcutta. I mean, this must be the same in Tamil Nadu also, where you've got somebody from Madurai who wants to go to Chennai, the government hospital in Chennai, and they need the MLA or the MP to sign something. And people would say, give us a referral note, give us a referral note. So apart from that, I think now for literally all the beneficiary programs, there is no need for any MLA or MP to sign or any public representative sign. And going back to my earlier point, Tabassum ji, jo maine kaha tha access ke liye, कि ये किसी के माध्यम से ये जो अपना उनको जो गारंटी होना चाहिए इन सब चीजों को मिलने के लिए, किसी के माध्यम से जाना पड़े, 10 बार किसी के पीछे बच्चे को घर के छोड़ के अगर वो बार-बार विधायक ऑफिस जाना पड़े, दौड़ना पड़े किसी महिला को, तो हम क्या कर रहे हैं? And I frankly feel ashamed that we have created a system where people are put through this. To get 1,000 rupees, agar 2,000 rupees kharch karna pade, I think it is absolutely shameful. It is shameful. And we have to get better at this. And, this is a great point that you built up. We have done something. Duare Sarkaar is aimed exactly at eliminating this. And I hope in the next 3 years or 5 years that this will be a thing of the past. कि किसी citizen को कोई public representative के पीछे भागना नहीं पड़े, उनका office नहीं जा पड़े, वहाँ इंतजार नहीं करना पड़े line में to do this. I really hope this कि सब कुछ हम direct जितना possible beneficiary के पास पहुंचाने पड़े. And maybe because he's a minister, I think it would be great if PTR also joined in. I know the question's aimed at me, but I would love to hear how Tamil Nadu is also handling this.
Thank you very much. I can understand Hindi, but I can't speak, so it's okay. I'll speak in English.
It's like Daya.
Yes. Look, I think there's a big problem. I'll just give you my experiences going as opposition MLA and then as minister. So opposition MLA, I set up, because of my previous experience over there, I set up a pretty sophisticated office with a lot of helpers, data systems, CRM, database of all my voters, cross-referencing all their requests, so forth. There's a broader philosophical question I'll come back to at the end of this, but because of that, I was able to get about 600 people who were eligible for pensions from the government. We validated 100% of them, and we gave it in. And, partly because of my reputation, my standing, my connectivity, whatever, I got better treatment than most MLAs, but that still only amounted to about 150, maybe 175 getting them. Because the government had no money, and they had an unwritten rule that only when people passed away, they could issue new pensions.
Yes,
now,
same here.
The irony of that is that having come to office and having announced in my first budget that we're going to do a data kind of purity project, we found in the data purity project that there were almost 1 lakh people who were listed as dead in the civil register. Now you can tell the civil register itself is not that accurate in good times. During COVID times, it's especially inaccurate because the deaths are not being recorded. We have seen many studies. And yet there were almost 1 lakh people who were listed as expired, who were still drawing pension benefits or these social security benefits, and some passed away as early as 2017. For 4.5 years, the system was still paying them. So clearly, there's a breakdown here. There's 2 parts to this. The one that's within our control is relatively easy. We're going to do automatic enrollment, as I just said. It'll maybe take us a couple of weeks. But anyway, let me just make one more data point. Once I became minister, I expanded my infrastructure because I said, I'm going to spend even less time in Madurai. I don't have the luxury of meeting my constituents as often. I put in a bigger team, tens of people on the ground. And this time I got about 900 and something applications that we were able to validate out of my 250,000 voters. And partly because I'm in government, partly because we removed this constraint in the finance department. We said, whatever it costs, we pay. Because we announced it in the assembly, we've got 800 and something of them processed and getting their money. Now, the bad news in this is when I dug a little deeper, my guys on the ground told me that the going rate for getting this 1,000 rupees in perpetuity till you passed was almost 17,000 rupees. Just think about that. You had to pay 17,000 rupees to get 1,000 rupees a month. And depending on your age, maybe your longevity was, 2 years or 3 years. So to get back like 25 or 30 or 40,000 rupees, over time, you have to pay upfront 70,000. It's atrocious. So the solution we have is that we're going to use a whole lot of data, and we're going to automatically enroll everybody who is above a certain age and we know to be living alone or widowed. And then we just say to activate your pension, all you have to do is show up at one of the health camps that we run regularly, record your basic kind of blood tests and heart check and BP. And as long as you come back every year to a health camp, you will automatically keep getting the payment. So we will notify you saying that you are eligible. If you don't have a phone, we'll send somebody to you and say you have now been enrolled for pension. Please come and take the health test. And as I said, we'll use that health database to keep checking their progress and so forth. But there's a big problem here. And that problem maybe is not so acute when you have people like me or my government or my party, but it's extremely acute when you have the people who are running the government in Delhi, is that at some level, there's no privacy anymore. We will know what you're doing across all the different platforms. For example, we gave 4,000 rupees a ration card as part of our manifesto to provide demand stimulus during the COVID lockdown. Now our data shows us that lakhs and lakhs of cards, maybe 5, 6, 7 lakhs of cards, have never availed of a single product from a fair price shop before the 4,000 rupees and never availed of it after the 4,000 rupees. Now, because we are about the only state that does universal issuance of ration cards, and then we stratify who gets what goods at what price and so forth. But we issue everybody a ration card. Now, maybe it's because of that, but now we have basically spent about between 250, 300 crores to people who otherwise never felt the need to come and access a single product at any time in their lives from the public distribution system. In my mind, that's not an efficient use of money. So the point is, if you start cross-referencing a lot of these things, we offered a gold loan waiver. The initial bill was 15, 18,000 crores. When we did all the cross-referencing, took out the frauds, the empty covers, the one family split their gold into 40 applications, etc., the bill only came out of about 5,000 crores. So that's how much the system is being played by the lack of data. Now we have to make the trade-off. Clean data will allow us to not leave anybody behind. And again, our philosophy is very clear, which I've stated on the floor of the House. The lowest sin of all is an ineligible beneficiary getting a government benefit as long as it's an individual. So our stated policy is, if the fingerprint doesn't match in the ration shop, give them the rice and the food anyway. We don't care. Let them not starve. We don't care if the one ration that the union forced on us with the Aadhaar linkage and all that. We just don't care. If it doesn't match, give them the stuff. So that is the lowest sin. The next high sin is if somebody who is eligible is turned away or not covered, then we feel that's administrative. But the cardinal sin is finding these institutional malfeasance instances where this cannot be done by one person. There's, lorry loads of rice disappear from the public distribution system, or lakhs of ration cards or fake ration cards. These kinds of things are a complete unacceptable to me, at least in my role as finance minister. That's the cardinal sin. And to prevent that, we have to rely on data, we have to rely on integration. But the more we do that, the less privacy a citizen has. So that's the fine balance that we're trying to figure out, that the state shouldn't get too intrusive, because heaven forbid that kind of tool gets into the wrong hands with people like the motivation of the union government, and then that can be used for all negative purposes. So that's the real worry.
Yeah.
Thank you both of you for that. Next question.
My name is Biraj Patnaik, and I head the National Foundation for India. I spent the better part of the last 25 years working on public policy delivery, large-scale public scheme delivery. But I'll use my time not so much to ask a question, but to highlight something that doesn't get spoken about much, which is the shrinking of civic space that we see overall. The naked Hindu majoritarian aggression that has taken this country from the north to the south. The shrinking of institutional spaces is neither highlighted nor spoken about, nor is there enough work happening with political parties and civil society organizations, with political parties and philanthropists or others, to kind of curtail this, because we are in this room today and we are having this frank conversation with some of the best people perhaps one could have, because there is an Indus Action. We are now moving to a point that organizations like Indus Action or NFI or others will not have the space to do anything because of this shrinking. Every day comes with a regulatory assault in terms of law, in terms of policy. And I do hope that as civil society, we are able to work better with political parties, with philanthropists, to address some of these issues much more systematically, have them highlighted in Parliament, have state governments step in to support wherever the central government is persecuting a organization, and take some of these issues forward. Thank you.
Yeah, let me sorry to jump in, but the assembly